There are things in the universe billions of years older than either of our races. They are vast, timeless. And if they are aware of us at all, it is as little more than ants. And we have as much chance of communicating with them as an ant has with us. We know. We've tried. And we've learned that we can either stay out from underfoot or be stepped on.
That's it? That's all you know?
Yes. They are a mystery. And I am both terrified and reassured to know that there are still wonders in the universe, that we have not yet explained everything. Whatever they are, Miss Sakai, they walk near Sigma 957. They must walk there alone.
An experiment gone wrong creates a super telepath, and the thought police want him
dead, if necessary.
Mind Twig!
Let him go!
Don't make me do this.
Walter Koenig guest stars on the next Babylon 5.
You have transmissions holding.
Patch incoming signal. Full audio and video decode.
Purple files accessed.
What you are about to see has never been shown to anyone outside the Grey Council.
Hello, everyone out there in podcast land. Welcome to Gray 17, Babylon5 podcast, a part of the Front Row Network and NPR Illinois Community Voices. We are here today to talk about the next episode in our long trial that is rewatching all of Babylon 5. And we are here today to talk about Mind War. With us is going to be, if you're just joining us for the first time, a bunch of newbies who have just watched up to Mind War and nothing else, and then some long-term fans who have seen the entire show. So the first part of this show will be us discussing Mind War with the newbies and getting their feedback and then getting their predictions and their questions. And then we will jettison the newbies out the airlock and start talking about the show as a whole with spoilers and all. So I am Scott, and with me, as always, is
Emily,
Jessi,
Blake. I'm Justin.
Andrew.
Kevin.
Nicole.
Good Mike.
And I'm Ryan.
And Ryan, that is a new sound. We usually have nasally Americans on this show, so we have a different accent on. Ryan is joining us from the Yum Yum podcast, which I'm sure he'll talk about in a moment. But Ryan, before we do that, we have two questions we ask everybody, and that is, who are you? And what do you want?
Wow, those are tough questions. How do I answer these? I'm Ryan Slawinski. That's my name. But is that who I am? I'm not too sure. I know that I've got yum yum up the wazoo. And what do I want? Boy, it's a tough thing. I kind of want to I want to remain the only Australian podcast that covers Babylon 5. I want to keep that in my territory, in my domain. That's kind of my goal in life, and I'm going to keep that, hopefully. Hopefully no other Australians listen to this and go, I want to take him down. It's just going to be me and my wife, Rachel.
It's fine. We got like 700 American Babylon 5 podcasts, and we being the newest one, so that's fine. The Babylon First guys beat us by like 6 weeks, and I'm bitter for that. It's okay. I still run their ads, so it's okay. Ryan, tell us about the podcast itself, aside from that it's Australian.
Well, my wife Rachel and I are a rewatch podcast, so we rewatch episodes of television shows. We do Star Trek Discovery and Babylon 5. So we're called Yum Yum because of an amazing line of dialogue, iconic, beautiful line from Star Trek Discovery where somebody said yum yum randomly off the cuff. And we just needed to understand why that happened. So we rewatched Discovery, talked about it episode by episode. Then we ran out of Discovery and we thought, why not Babylon 5? We're always bringing up Babylon 5 when we talk about Discovery. So we're rewatching Babylon 5. We're about the start of season 3, midway through season 3. So if people out there are experienced in Babylon 5, come on over to us, check us out. We like to get analytical, get nice and deep into the episodes. We like to talk about actors that pop up in each one, production stuff, as well as just the beats of the story of an episode.
So when you're tired of our shenanigans and you want actually a quality show, the link to their show is in the show notes. Once you start with us, the bar is so low, all you can do is go up. So we're here today to talk about Mind War. Mind War is a very special episode. For one, I think it's an episode that actually matters in the grand scheme of things, but also it's a very special episode for us Star Trek nerds because, of course, Walter Koenig makes his first appearance on Babylon 5. I say first because I will spoil Bester will return. I did like, though, that
spoiler alert, bro. Man, come on.
Bester will return. He did not die. He did not get vaporized.
He said he will be back. He'll be seeing you again.
Yes. And you don't let Walter Koenig be a one-off. But Emily, I did like that you sent me a text when you were watching it, and all he was Chekhov and Cal caps. It was great. So let's go ahead and start doing our first impressions of Mind War. And since I already called her out once, we'll go to Emily first.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, so I was really excited because I was like, yay, it's Chekhov! And then I was like, he's a dick. And yeah, that was not cool. I was really disappointed in that. Other than that, I just noticed like a lot of people were kind of missing from this episode. Like, we haven't seen Dr. Franklin since the infection. I don't know what he's doing. Maybe you're recovering from that disaster. Yeah, but I was so happy to see Chekhov, and then just so disappointed in him being such a horrible person.
You see, with Walter Koenig, for me, and I don't know if anyone else is like this on the podcast, but at least I am. When I think Walter Koenig, I do not think Chekhov. I think Bester, because honestly, and again, I'm burying the lead from 2, 3, 4 seasons from now. He gets more to do with Bester than he ever did with Chekhov.
He got more to do with Bester in this singular episode than he did in any Star Trek episode he was in.
Very true.
Act.
Yeah.
Very true.
Except looking for the nuclear vessels.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's very funny in Star Trek 4.
True.
He's even funnier in Future. No idea what we're talking about.
Nothing.
It's the one with the whales in it.
But you haven't seen any Star Trek, so there you go.
I haven't even seen a Star Trek.
That's one of the things we're going to do. We're going to do reaction shows where we'll just do it on Facebook Live, and we'll just make Jessi watch stuff that we know she's going to hate.
So she can watch more than one Star Wars.
Yeah.
We've got a good start with this show, so keep it rolling, kids.
Okay, let's go to Jessi next. First impressions for Mind War.
I didn't hate it.
Oh my God!
What? I know. I didn't hate it. Actually, I was in about the middle of it, and I was like, this isn't so bad. I hated a bunch of the characters, and I hated the Psi Cops, both of them. And I'm guessing that's the guy you guys are talking about, being 17 different characters.
Bester, okay. Yeah. Walter Koenig, he was in Star Trek from 1960, whatever on. But yes.
So This is the first time I've ever seen his face, and he's kind of a dick. So that's how I felt. And I didn't hate Ivanova this time. She kind of like, listen, you're the problem. So I think she actually at one point said, listen, lady, you're the situation. And so she was a lot less snarly this time for better reason. And there were some, we can talk about it later, but there were some lines that were said, something about it's not anatomically possible. And it took me a second to catch on what was going on. And I was like, oh, this is gold. So it was, I didn't hate it. It was a good time today.
Not anatomically correct, Mr. Garibaldi, but you're welcome to try.
You're welcome to try anytime.
Garibaldi just wanted to show him his first favorite thing in the universe. That's all.
I have that in my notes. Did Garibaldi just tell Chekhov to go fuck himself?
Either that or stick his head up so far up his ass. One of the two.
Yeah.
Or like I was thinking Red Foreman in that, where it's like stick a boot up your ass or something. Like that's, I think we're all kind of thinking the same thing in that.
Either way, it had something to do with his butthole, and there was no Soul Hunter around to find out. So, okay. I see John's not even here, but I still do callbacks. By the way, John's not here this week because he drove, and I guess he can't drive and Zoom at the same time. So he'll be back next week. Let's go ahead and move on to Blake. First impressions.
So first impression for me, and I'll go back to something you said, Scott, is for me, Walter Koenig is Bester. You know, that is a role I identify him with even more so than Chekhov. And actually, I'll say I got to meet him at a convention one time, and they had the pictures there that you could have signed. And there was the picture of him as Chekhov, and then there was this like the whole stack of the Bester picture. And no one was taking that one. But that is the one I actually took, was the picture of him as Bester when I went through the signing line, because that, you know, that's just the role I associate him with. This episode for me has some frustrations, largely looking at larger arc, and it opens up a few plot holes, which we'll discuss later after we throw the newbies out the airlock. But overall, I think this sets up the episode for a lot of what we see going forward with Psi Cops, with what some of their programs are, sets up the persona we're going to see there throughout the rest of the series, which becomes important a lot later on.
Yeah, we'll definitely have some discussion beyond the rim on this one for sure. Let's go to Justin next.
I mean, honestly, when I first realized that Walter Koenig was going to be on this episode, it immediately became my favorite so far of the series, because unlike you guys, I'm come from the other aspect of it. To me, Walter Koenig will always be Chekhov. And it was really weird hearing him without a Russian accent, even though I know he's Canadian, and I've always known that. But the moment he started talking with a regular accent, or I guess I can't say regular accent, I apologize to our Australian friend. But hearing him without a Russian accent, at least, was very strange for me. But just a couple things that I picked up from the episode itself is, to me, the entire episode is, and I had this kind of like starred and underlined in my notebook here, is the entire episode is about the escalation of weaponry. Mm-hmm. And when has that ever not gone wrong? Mm-hmm. So that was kind of, to me, the overall theme of the entire episode of, you know, you have somebody who, you know, you have a secret governmental agency. Let's, you know, while we're talking about Star Trek, you know, the Section 31 or any kind of like Black Shadow organization, training these PSYOP officers to become telekinesis people and all the things that can possibly go wrong with it. So that whole aspect of it I thought was pretty fascinating. The subplot with G'Kar and Catherine, I thought was kind of interesting as well. You know, G'Kar being very, no, don't go to, I'm telling you, don't go to this planet. You don't want to go to this planet. I promise you. And the whole thing sets up to where, you know, something bad will happen to her if she goes to this planet. And then G'Kar's like, well, yeah, I knew this was going to happen. I sent a warship to actually save you. We're not all what we seem. So you kind of see a kind heart from G'Kar, as weird as that can kind of be. But I think probably I have to give the quote of the episode to Ivanova, talking about calculated risks and talking about juggling babies over the fire pit. That is another calculated risk. And as soon as I saw that, my entire opinion of her changed. I'm sorry, Jessi. I'm no longer anti-Ivanova.
Justin, we only have about 150 some odd episodes ago. You are going to recognize her name is Ivanova before it's
I keep saying it wrong.
That's it.
I keep saying it wrong. Honestly, it's the Indiana in me now. I can't say anything correctly.
No one should have any Indiana in them ever. It's crazy.
I know.
As the person with the most foreign last name, Slawinski, I'll forgive you for mispronouncing a European name.
But he does it every episode.
I'll forgive you this one time.
Godforsaken state, and I pronounce everything incorrectly now.
But I do want to. You make very good points there too, and I want to point out the same episode where maybe Jessi's making a turn, Jakar is maybe making a turn as well too. I think maybe keep that in mind.
Maybe Andrew, he's not all bad.
Andrew, what do you got?
I'm kind of with Emily on the fact that Chekhov was in this episode. I know his name is Walter Koenig, but I will call him Chekhov throughout this session. I like seeing Chekhov in something outside of Star Trek. Haven't really seen him in anything outside of that. I liked the world building of the telepaths and how it seems like they have their own little system, and how they have the Psi Cops or whatever they called them.
Yeah, Psi Cops.
Scale to measure.
Mm-hmm. And Justin mentioned, Section 31, but I don't think Section 31 has its own Star Fury fleet. So we also got that going too. The Black Omegas. Kevin, first impressions.
I really enjoyed the end where Synclone owns Bester. You get so much more about the Psi-Corps in this episode. It's a really fascinating episode for the lead up of how the series is going to go with relation to Psi-Corps. So I very much enjoy this episode, and seeing Walter Koenig in a completely different part is very interesting as well. But yeah, this is a good episode, minus some of the incredible overacting of one of the guest stars. Oh wow.
So, and it's probably not Walter Koenig. So I'm going to guess you're talking about our friend, good old Ironheart.
Yeah. Yikes.
Hey, he's becoming, as Ryan pointed out.
We won't talk about what.
He became all right.
He became all over the place.
Again, that line is drawn. I danced around it. You just go, screw it, I'm over the line.
Yeah, he became right in Talia's brain at the end. What a lovely scene.
Yep, she's moving pennies now.
I really do enjoy seeing a different side of Jakar in this too, because he makes a big deal about how no one's what they seem, but I think it's really clear that no one is totally good and no one is totally evil, especially the ambassadors.
Okay, Nicole, what do you got?
I actually really like this episode. I have a lot of notes and I wrote down a lot of things that we can discuss when we go to the next section, but overall, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really kind of foreshadowing what's to come throughout the future episodes. I liked getting to see the other side of Jakar where he wasn't a total douchebag. I liked seeing kind of more about Talia Winters and her interaction. I really, really got to say, I'm kind of warming up to Ivanova. She really, the fact that she was sassing that Psi Cop broad, who I hated, by the way, she was totally sassing her and standing her ground with her. And then she was nice to Talia. She gave her water after she got scanned, and she was actually kind of redeeming in this one. So, in the very beginning, I said I wanted to punch Jakar in his stupid face. Now, just his face, not stupid. He's kind of warming up to me a little bit too. So, but overall, I really liked it. I thought there was a lot of meat to this episode, if that makes sense. Yeah, I have a lot of other things I want to talk about that I thought were kind of fun. So, but yeah, overall, I really liked it. And if this is kind of what's to come, I'm even more excited.
I've kind of told you guys for a while now that bear with season 1. It is a slow burn, but you can start feeling JMS putting his foot on the gas. And I think in about 3 episodes, the gas will be fully pushed. So, and then we'll get TKO. So it's going to slow down again, but we're getting there. We're getting there. I promise. Mike.
Yeah, I really like this episode for lots of different reasons. I think you guys have kind of touched on all of them, but, Bester is a high point. Getting Walter Koenig in there, he's really a great actor. And I think it kind of speaks to that point when you have, his other most notable role being Chekhov. I always kind of looked at Chekhov as being like the teddy bear of the Enterprise. He's the sort of shrimpy, lovable character, the Radar O'Reilly, if you're a MASH fan. Whereas in this episode, he plays just such an impressive piece of crap. He's just, he's evil from the minute he shows up on screen. and that carries through the entire episode, and it leaves you kind of excited to see him again. So he's a joy in this one. Besides that, I think it's a pretty cool sci-fi premise. I really appreciate, as I think it was Justin mentioned, the overarching theme of this episode kind of being the escalation of arms. And this is the second episode with that primary theme that we've already watched, Infection being the first one. Foreshadowing. In Infection, that civilization escalated arms and wiped themselves out. So read into that what you will. And like I said, I think it's a cool sci-fi premise anyway, that you're taking the psychic powers to the next level, and you're getting a taste of, where that can go and just how bad that can be. And they use it as a mechanism to foreshadow the rest of, possibly the series, right? There have been a lot of rumblings about who's actually the bad guy in this series. And it's like, well, Psi Cop is actually the one running the Earth government. They just kind of put it right out there on the face of it. And as if that wasn't bad enough, you have Walter Koenig come right on screen and tell you, I'm a person of great responsibility, and I use that to bend the rules however I see fit. And I mean, it's not even like the quiet part said out loud. Well, it is the quiet part said out loud. He says it directly to Garibaldi and Sinclair's face. Of course, Ivanova has that great line. It's very iconic. Who watches the Watchmen? And I think that's something to remember going forward. Other than that, I mean, I think it's overall a solid episode. Besides, as some others mentioned, some rough CGI and some overacting here and there. I love the progression of Jakar's character. I think, up until now, they set him up as the conniving strawman villain, and then you see him in an episode where you're meant to sympathize a little bit with him, and they portray him almost as a bumbling fool in the last episode. This time you find out that and you get a hint of it in the last episode, but this time you really find out that he is more savvy than and he has more going on upstairs than he's let on. He knows more about the other people. And speaking of characters that we haven't seen in a while, it's just a remark that I've kind of been thinking in the last few episodes, and I don't know if I've said it yet on the podcast or not, but I actually really appreciate the fact that in B5, they have this kind of, I don't know if you'd call them an ensemble cast, because there's a lot of cast members, and I actually really appreciate the fact that they don't feel compelled to put too many of them on the screen in any given episode. I do think there are certain characters who have been absent for maybe too long of a stretch at a time. I mean, we haven't seen Kosh since the opening, The Gathering, and I don't think we've seen Franklin very much either, but I do like that they don't feel compelled to give everybody B, C, D, E, and F plots in every episode to overstuff things. So they kind of stick to their solid 3 or 4 people that are relevant and run with it. So that's it. I think overall it was a really good episode. It's probably the most enjoyable episode for me so far.
One thing, a couple things to hit on with you. I'm glad several of you bring up the escalation piece, and I like the fact that the subplot A and B, or plot A and B, both follow that, because not only are we escalating what's happening with the Psi Corps and what's happening with EarthGov, but we are escalating the universe too, with the idea that there are races out there that would see us, as Jakar points out, like ants. And so that's building up a universe there as well, too, and escalating that, too. And also, to your ensemble piece, one thing that JMS mentioned in the Usenets back in the day, and he was talking about one actor, and I won't say which one, but that they were signed on for 13 episodes in the season. And I think that was the standard contract. So I think everyone signed close to 13 or more episodes per. So that would be why you're seeing some folks come and go, because they're planned for about half the season, each one of them, aside from Sinclair and so forth and so on.
I just want to jump in on thing too, to Mike's comment, especially about the Kosh character, though, because they've already alluded to a little bit that Kosh is an elusive character anyway. They've commented in episodes so far that he doesn't show up at the council meetings, that doesn't involve himself in a lot of things. So I also think that's part of the actual character development of Kosh is more mentioned than seen at this point, to build that mystery around Kosh himself as well as the Vorlons as a whole, rather than being super present like we've had with Londo or Delenn or even Jakar.
When we did have him in Midnight on the firing line, which was episode 1, so it's been a while. But remember, he had that line where Sinclair was talking about the Narn and the Centauri, and Scott just said, "Let him die, let them both die." So yeah. So we'll move over to our guest lecturer of the evening, Ryan. What are your impressions on Mind War?
Well, let me get my whiteboard out and just write it all down.
Yes.
Quick fire impressions is obviously, yes, Walter Koenig is a delight. I grew up with him as Chekhov, but this was the real turning point for me in terms of, he can act. He has multiple nuances as a performer. I've always seen him play Chekhov or play a version of himself in things like Futurama. So I was like, I didn't realize he could act. The other thing that I took away from this, and I still take away from this, is Mind War visually looks very different to a lot of episodes. It's much more of a silvery blue hue over the entire thing. So it stands out visually as striking and different, and something else is afoot. The other thing that I really take away from this, I always did when I first saw it, was Earth sucks, huh? Earth doesn't seem the greatest because we literally have not only the Psi Corps organization, but they always, to me, when I first saw Talia Winters, I always got a whiff of Nazi vibes. The blonde-haired, blue-eyed lady with the black gloves and the tight dress. And then we have Walter Koenig walk in looking like an SS officer. And I just thought, I always think it's so crazy to me that we have our crew of characters, Sinclair, the good guy, and this is the world they live in, where he casually chats to a mind cop who looks like a little Nazi. And I just think that is just one of those things where I look at it and go, this is an unsettling thing straight off the bat, where you've had these kind of seeds in the show that Earth is kind of crappy, and Psi Corps is definitely one of those big things in the background. And then we bring it to the front here, where it's like, here they are, and they're not the nicest. They keep secrets, and what they're up to is total domination and control to the atomic level, people. That's crazy. That's crazy. So overall, this isn't a personal favorite of mine in season 1. I have some issues with it. I'm not a huge Talia Winters fan either as a character, and I kind of wish she got more to actually do in this plot. She basically serves as a character to kind of tell other characters things, like what happens when telepaths make love. I'm so glad we got that information. But other than that, Jakar is a big turning point as well for me when viewing it too, because I remember the early days watching this show where I just went, it's nice that we have a villain on the show, the evil lizard man with the red eyes who's played by Tomalok. It's so great we have a villain on this show. But then this episode, he goes out of his way to say, like, hey, you're judging me on certain values, but maybe I'm more than that. And he proves to be more. And I like the overall conversation of, you wanted a different answer to fit the narrative of what you think of me. Well, I didn't give that to you because maybe I'm more complex than that. Maybe I'm more than just the mustache twirling villain of the show. So that's what I think of Mind War in a nutshell.
You've made Justin very excited because Justin has been playing the Nazi vibes since The Gathering. And
Thank you. Someone else has seen that.
Yeah. Doesn't he look like an SS officer?
Yes,
just a bit.
So. Even the Psi Corps, it's the Psi logo, but it's very, there is dripping metaphor here. That's for sure. Justin, do you have anything else you want to add since we're talking about Earth?
No, honestly, I was squealing with glee in the background when he was talking about this because this is something I picked up on from the very first recording that we did. In the very first watch from when we watched The Gathering, I really questioned what was the Earth Alliance, what was their motives, the whole presidential election thing that was going on in the background that we really haven't seen the repercussions from that yet, or maybe we're starting to. It's that was a lot of the same things that I picked up on. So when you were talking about that, I was sitting there just clapping in the background going, finally, someone is seeing the same things that I am with this. It was wonderful. And then the fact that Tomalok is one of my other favorite characters in the whole Star Trek universe, that just, I always loved Jakar. one of my favorite characters in the show, and I love to see that he has more dimensions to him that he has shown so far. So, yep, that's all I have to say about that, y'all.
Awesome. Mike, what do you got? I see your hand up.
Yes. Yeah, just, two quick things. And that is, I do think even I picked up on the Nazi vibes as well. And I think even from the very introduction where Bester comes out and he refuses to vocally speak to other people, my instant read of that was that, he believes non-psychic powered people are lesser than him. It could just be that he's this dude with a super important job and a lot of responsibility that he immediately goes to Sinclair and flaunts. But to me, it was more than that. I instantly read it as like, no, he thinks people that aren't psychic are beneath him. In case in point, I mean, he starts off not speaking to random security guy. He goes straight to Sinclair, the most important man on Babylon 5, and pulls the same shit. Like, he did not care. And I thought that was very telling and a very savvy way to write that character, to let you know immediately where that dude stands. And then I just wanted to mention one other thing that kind of struck me as I watched it. And as much as I'm also not really a huge fan of the Talia Winters character at this point, I know she's a very good actress, whose name I did not write down. But there was one thing, which is, when they're all together in Sinclair's office and Bester is telling them, like, they interview her and they say, like, all right, well, we're going to have to scan you. I actually was really taken by her acting in that scene, because she instantly turned on the, like, oh no, like, please don't do that. That's scary and I dread it and it's going to suck and whatever. I mean, I like that really sold the moment to me. It was a very good piece
and
of
that
acting.
connection between her and Ivanova in that moment too, where Ivanova's the only person to like physically reach out to her when after that's all done. I think to your point as well, what makes it interesting with Bester and the Psi Cops is not only do they see humans as the normal humans as inferior, but I like that in that mind scan scene, it's like, well, she's a fellow telepath. She has to comply. So even within their own structure, there's classism or like a elitism where they're P12s, she's a P5 or whatever. Like, even within their own weird little organization, they still have layers to it, rather than it just being the whole organization looks at the other people as lesser. They look at each other as lesser as well, which is just crazy.
I love that reoccurring kind of sci-fi trope about, like, what happens to society when everybody is assigned a rating. Like, they did it on Community with Meow Meow Beans, and they did it on an episode of The Orville, and I'm sure hundreds of other places.
Well, I mean, it's the whole historical human thing of a caste system.
Mm-hmm.
And you see caste systems still get portrayed through science fiction, even through not only like through certain, like now we have it in Babylon 5, but if you look through like literary science fiction like Red Rising, and you have like a lot of that different caste system still get dragged with humanity through the ages.
Kevin, what do you got?
Well, I thought the line from Garibaldi, which was almost a throwaway line, was really interesting, where he says, "We got to get them out of here because I don't like the way he looks at me, like he's about to squash me like a bug." I really enjoy that line. And that goes. I'm sorry. When Jakar's talking about his aunt, he's not just talking about the aliens out in that sector. It all ties back together.
Well, I was going to say the two plots, although they don't tie together per se narratively, other than Sakai says, "Good morning, Sinclair. I'm going to go off and have my plot now. Bye." They tie up thematically with the overarching thing of basically stay in your lane, don't play God. Things are bigger than you, and that's okay to be. While Psy-Corps doesn't see it that way, they want to be more than ants. And Jakar, on the other hand, says to Sakai, "Well, that's okay. It's good that there's still mysteries and wonders and things bigger than us in the universe," while humanity, on the other hand, doesn't see it that way, which is telling.
Yeah, that state-sanctioned forced mind rape scene is pretty disturbing. It really gives you some insight into the inner workings of Psi-Corps and how it is less than a legitimate organization.
Ryan, you mentioned how Ivanova was the one who reached out at that point. I think, Jessi, you did as well, too. Remember, Ivanova is the one who watched the Psi-Corps come to their house every so often and give her mom drugs. So she has watched this happen much more than anyone else. Although we do know that Sinclair seems to have had experience with Psi Cops as well too, because he definitely seemed like he was trying to put up some blocks when Bester was talking to him. He didn't do very well, but he was trying. Blake, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts too, as we kind of have delved into talking about G'Kar, and I think we've touched on a little bit. It felt in a lot of these early episodes like that was one of the characters they weren't sure the direction fully that it was going to go. And I think here we kind of see that turning point with G'Kar from being more that antagonist just there to fight with Londo to the G'Kar that we're going to see later in the series, as far as, you know, being a more knowledgeable and thoughtful individual to the greater scheme of what's going on in the galaxy than just, you know, the feud that he has with Londo and the Centauri. But the other piece is, I kind of agree. I was never a big fan of the Talia character because it just feels like there was never a set direction with Talia, and Talia is just kind of there. And I know what happens ultimately in the series away from the newbies, and this episode for me creates some problems with that we'll jump into later. But
wait until I jettison them. Wait.
I'm gonna wait. But you know, this episode for me is another point where Talia just feels a little bit wasted as a character, honestly, and not much development except for the piece with Ivanova, because we're gonna see some more there also. And I think this also starts the seeds of what we're gonna see later on between Talia and Ivanova.
Nicole.
So it was kind of touched upon about the Ivanova's mom. That's kind of something I kind of picked up on about how this really demonstrated how problematic the Psi Corps is and how, like, it's not necessarily with the right mind behind it. Because realistically, from what Ivanova said and what we've learned so far is you can either comply and be in the Psi Corps and go through their training and all that, or you can take meds to suppress it, or you die, basically. Like, there's no option, you know? So that I remember from that episode being kind of problematic. And then little Mr. Nazi and his bitch come in, and they just, you know, refuse to speak to people. And like you had said, Ryan, like, just kind of like they're too good for the humans or anybody else, that they refuse to speak at first. And I noticed that. So, like, in my brain, I'm kind of like tying together all these problematic things about the Psi Corps, and then what they did to Talia, and like what they, you know, like they experimented on people and trying to make them stronger and trying to change their abilities. Like, it just sounds straight up whack as hell and like not good, you know? And I forgot who it was that said it, but like, you know, this, I think it was Jason Ironheart. He said that the Psi Corps is not what you think. It used to be run by the government, but now it's run by the Psi Corps, and they're just worried about people's powers becoming more strong and how they can like weaponize that and sell that and things like that. So I really feel like this is kind of a turning point as well with that, the whole Psi Corps storyline. And when he said at the end, like, you'll see me again and I'll be back or whatever, I have a feeling, and maybe I'll save this for the foreshadowing section, but like, I just think that this isn't the end of this, and I think it's just going to escalate further.
Emily, what do you got?
Yeah, one of the things that, okay, other than the obvious, what people have said about the Psi Corps, is that they basically created Ironheart to have, like, he was what they were trying to create, and then they were mad, like, upset that they created it, and it was harmful to him, like, because obviously it was, he was definitely struggling and was having a hard time controlling it. So they tried to create him basically as a super weapon, and then they have the nerve to think that they can take him out. He now has these advanced powers that you were looking for, and you two think you're actually strong enough to like stop him. Yeah, you have this weird stop code or whatever thing, but he now has all like these additional powers and strengths that's probably not going to work, which is what we saw happen, obviously. The whole arrogance of it all was not really astounding, but just kind of like gross, for lack of a better word. It was just, yeah, definitely not a fan. And I feel like they're going to be the new villain of the show.
Justin.
So my comment's kind of twofold. I really like what Nicole said and others have said about the Psi Corps in general, about how they are pretty much the Gestapo of the Earth Alliance, which makes me actually really like Ivanova-ish. Okay. Still not there yet.
You're getting there. You're learning. It's good. I'm proud of you.
Which makes me like Ivanova.
Now you did it. That one right there was perfect.
Ivanova, which makes me like Ivanova a lot better, is her natural hostility towards them. And you saw that displayed, like from the moment they walked on the station, you could see the hatred in her face towards them. And it softened me to her a little bit. I'm sorry, Jessi, but you're losing people here in the anti-Ivanova crowd, because I'm slowly starting. They warned us early on that we would slowly start to soften to her, and sadly, it's happening. With the history that her family has with this organization, my question is then, why would she continue to serve the Earth Alliance, knowing what these people are? And I guess hopefully that's something that'll be, answered over time. I hate to keep coming back to the Nazi thing, but to me, it's kind of the closest relation that I have with what's going on with this organization. If you're a member of the Wehrmacht, like Ivanova is, and you notice that the Gestapo, which is the Psi Corps, is doing horrible, awful things, why could you justify still continuing to serve? And that in our own Earth history has proven to be a very valid thing that has happened, but it's still a question that keeps getting brought up from time to time. So I really, honestly, like, if any character development happens throughout the rest of this show, I keep wanting to go back to see where she develops as a character, just from what other people have said, where like a lot of the longtime B5 people on this show have said, she's one of my favorite characters. She's my favorite character. I still want to know why. I'm craving to find out why. So I look forward to kind of seeing that whole story develop. And then I think the very interesting thing with me with the Psi Corps in general is they physically described what a force choke feels like.
Yeah.
And I thought that was actually kind of cool.
Scary as hell too, isn't it? Before we move on to Jessi and Nicole, just you guys are hitting the Nazi piece a lot. And the one thing I do want to give a little background on is, and I shill for this autobiography every episode because it is really good. Newbies, you can't read it. And that is Becoming Superman, JMS's autobiography. And as I've mentioned a little bit already, his father was very involved with the Nazis during World War II. He was young. They were in Poland, and he hung out with members of the German military to a point where the members of the German military made him a little Nazi uniform that he could wear. And there's more to that story, but
no kidding.
And there's more to the whole story of his father. Read the book. Justin, you can't. Not yet. But
I know, like, this is honestly, I hope this is my thank you for doing the podcast after
buying you a book
years or something like that. Send me a copy of the autobiography, because I'm honestly dying to read this.
I want a copy too.
I would say I will get you all copies when we're all said and done. That being said, you should listen to the audiobook because it's read by Londo.
As someone myself who comes from a Polish background, like I also just naturally have like the sense of like, oh, those are black uniforms and Chekhov's hair is parted to the side. I know what's going on here. It's not subtle to me, especially, but it is that thing. You go into your sci-fi shows, especially like this, and you kind of expect at least for me, Star Trek or a lot of other shows kind of color. It's like, oh, this is a utopian world where humanity is kind of good. And then it's like, not necessarily that great. But I also want to touch upon, there was that point mentioned about Ivanova. It's like, why do you still serve in this Earth Force when things are corrupt? What I think in this episode it shows you at least is she doesn't keep quiet about what's wrong. She says out loud, like, I know what this is and I don't like it. While other characters may say that or may say it in a more kind of like off the cuff way to each other, but she looks these Psi Cops in the eyes and says, I hate you and what you represent.
Fair enough. I like that.
Yeah. Jessi.
So I sat here last week on the same podcast, and my name was slandered by Scott when he said that I am Ivana. And
you are.
You saw a lot of
100%.
me, her and me, me and her, whatever. So today is the first episode that I actually saw that. I am watching the episode and I'm like, ooh, that was very Jessi-like. Like it was just like, ma'am, you're the problem. And, sometimes when people are, pussyfooting around it, I do that on a daily basis. Like, hi, let me show you what it's really like. Right. And so watching her today, I'm not going to say I like her because that's what you all want. But I did see a lot of the characteristics that we've been talking about for the last couple months. So it was kind of refreshing to see.
This is the first step, Jessi, to acceptance. This is the first step. You will get there. But you are definitely Ivana. You are definitely Ivanova.
Yeah, no, I mean, anyone who knows you and knows this show, you are Ivanova. I'm sorry, you are. Maybe Ivanova is you, just to be a little less condescending, but yes, okay. you are. Nicole, what do you got?
Well, I just kind of wanted to lighten up the conversation a little and point out that one of my favorite parts with the whole Psi Corps and Talia and everything was when Garibaldi was in the elevator with her and she elbowed him. And he goes, I think I'm in love. So he definitely said something inappropriate in his mind, and she totally caught it. So I just thought that was really funny and very Garibaldi, shooting a shot in his mind, not even out loud. So I thought it was kind of funny.
And he took it away as a positive experience as well when he got elbowed. He's like, I'm in love, I think. Oh, so delightful. Yeah, this episode is like has a lot of big plot things in it, like a lot of bit like, oh, the world is happening. But I still like that there's time for cute little character sides. Like Catherine Sakai got to be in this episode, which is nice because she's in the previous episode and there's that air of like, will she come back? And then she's immediately here. And I like that her and Sinclair are just sharing a nice little morning together, a little kiss, a little bit of coffee, and Sinclair says, are you sure you want to work with a megacorp? Which is just a hilarious line on its own. Like, are you sure you want to do capitalism? And she's like, I can do it. I like that there's moments like she does her little Jakar impression to herself. Just like, this is a heavy episode where we have like all of these big lurching themes that are very oppressive, or even things under the surface. Like they mentioned that Jason Ironheart's relationship with Talia was when she was his student, which is just one of those things that you start adding up the numbers and you go, that's worrisome. But we still have moments where it's like, here's Garibaldi having a laugh to himself about how he has the hots for this woman, and we can still have all of this stuff where it keeps it not too oppressive.
Yeah, there was a lot of comic relief in this episode, I thought, and it was really good and like needed.
Within a year, those two actors will be married. They get married in 1995. Andrea Thompson and Jerry Doyle.
And promptly divorced within 2 years.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say that. I was going to be positive and say they had a romance bud. And
he had an amazing quote about that. I can't remember where he said, like, the best thing about my wedding was the drinks afterwards.
Justin.
I mean, I guess that, now that you mentioned the fact of that whole Talia and Lionheart, it was obviously a big part of the episode, but really I didn't hit with a lot of chemistry between those two characters. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they made a mention of the fact that there was a past romantic history with them. But even when you had like the really bad lightning graphics and the psychic earthquakes and stuff like that, and she was the only one that can get in to talk to him, I still never really picked up that chemistry.
I blame William Allen Young, who is the actor who played Ironheart, on that more than anything. I mean, he wasn't given much to play with. Your job is to be mentally constipated through the entire episode. But I think he could have done more to show that not only was he a lover of Talia, but he was a mentor. And I didn't see either one of those in his performance.
It's difficult because the script doesn't allow it, because he's too busy being more than human. He's beyond being Jason Ironheart anymore. So I also, in a way, I kind of like the fact that they didn't spend time on him and her giving each other googly eyes going, I love you, Jason. Don't become a big guy in the sky. And he's like, no, I'm too busy. Psi Corp's evil and they're trying to assassinate people. Help me. I don't know. It's just one of those things where it's just like, Talia in the episode 2 it relies on her giving the speech about what it's like when telepaths make love, which is very funny to me, but I think it is supposed to be like the crux of why this relationship is important. He's the only person, or one of the few only people she's been with where she can take down the barriers of being a psychic person. And I think it's supposed to do a lot of the heavy lifting of their chemistry rather than the two actors together would.
Mike?
The very end of the episode where he gifts her telekinetic abilities, Jason, 80s action adventure hero name, I have to ask myself, like, wasn't that kind of a dick move? Because they're clearly going to come after her if they ever find out that she has telekinetic abilities, because they just chased this other guy across the whole universe because they wanted to have that. They were trying to make one. So it just reminded me, like, I'd seen this like tweet from Kanye West years ago about like falling asleep on a flight and waking up with a water bottle next to you, and you're like, great, now I have to be responsible for this too. Like, that to me was exactly what her face looked like at the end when she moves the penny. She's like, shit.
Well, and not only is she responsible for that now too, and thank you for the Kanye reference. That's a first for us. Yes. But he flat out said earlier in the episode, most of them lose their mind anyway. So not only is she responsible for being whatever she just became, but she's probably going to go crazy based on just statistics.
I'm thinking she won't, because he did it better. Character. But
her plot armor will protect her.
But
it's a way in the show to give Talia her mystery and secret. That's what it is. We have Sinclair with his missing 24 hours. We have Ivanova with her backstory. We have Garrow. Everyone has like some thing going on. And Talia, other than being telepathic, she's had nothing happening thus far. So this is the show going, here's a thing for her. And I was curious to hear from our newbies what they thought about that. Like, they're giving her this big ability at the end of the episode that is clearly saying the dynamic of the show with this character will not be the same going forth. That's at least how I've always interpreted it. Is like, you give a character this god power, you're going to have to do something with it in the future. I'm curious to hear what the newbies thought.
She's a target now. That's what I think of it.
That's exactly what my read of it was.
Yeah. Have fun. I'm out. I'll see you in a million years.
Thank you for painting this giant target on my back, Space God.
Yeah.
Well, and the fact that he specifically says to Sinclair, I'll see you in a million years.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that kind of stuck out to me, too.
Yeah.
Well, we will talk about questions and predictions soon. And Justin, I promise you, we will talk about the million years just as soon as you leave the chat.
Of course you will. I can't wait to hear about it in a year and a half from now.
You're welcome. Jessi, what do you got?
So I'm excited to see where they take her, chemistry or not. I feel like I saw the chemistry when she was talking to him initially, and she had tears streaming down her face. Yeah, you're wrong, Scott. I told you, everybody's got their opinion. Yours is not usually right.
I'm just shocked and appalled that I was called like naive and ignorant when I said Londo was being cute with his eyes open. But you see a little tear running down her cheek, and now there's chemistry.
Londo was being creepy. First of all, let's revisit that one. I just listened to that one yesterday. And again, everybody's got their opinion. Scott.
All tea, all shade going on here in the Gray 17 podcast. All tea, all shade.
No, but she's a phenomenal actress. She's good and she's bland, and I hate it because they haven't given her a lot. And up until this episode, we don't see her. She's just this weirdo that walks around with gloves on. Like she's not. They haven't developed her. And as you see her today, you see her show emotion even when Ironheart wasn't, because like we've talked about, you can't really have a lot going on up here and be emotionally connected with somebody. Did have some issues with him being her mentor and them sleeping together.
It is another layer of weirdness to the Psi Corp dynamic, because it says, she even says that we haven't seen each other in like 10 years. It's like, well, how old is Talia?
Right.
For a start. And it's like, when were the relationships? It was like that type of thing. So, yeah.
It's creepy. And so watching the whole situation unfold, I'm excited to see where they go with her. Now, like you said, 1 in 10,000 telepaths are telekinetic, and 5,000 of those 10,000 they've lost their minds. So granted, like you said, somebody said she's a main character. That's probably not going to happen, but that did beg the question of what exactly is her role moving forward.
We're going to go to Emily, and then we'll do questions, predictions.
Okay. Yeah, it was about Talia getting the telekinetic powers, and I agree that it does put a target on her if they find out. But I feel like he gave her more than that because he had so much more ability. So I kind of saw it as him giving her something to help protect her from them because of how corrupt the system is. So she's not going to be to his level because obviously she would exist in some sort of different plane or form or whatever. But she might now be able to fight what they're doing a little bit better because she has a new ability, a new skill, a new knowledge base. So I felt like it was kind of, putting the target on her, but it might also be a way to help her and help if she tries to take down the system at some point, because I would actually like to see that, because Psi Corps is obviously corrupt and terrible and they need to go away.
Yeah, I agree. It gives her defense as well. Like we kind of look at it as like, since Psi Corps is first really given a spotlight in this episode, they seem like this unstoppable force. But we even see here that human characters like Sinclair can put Bester in his place. So imagine another telepath who's slightly aware of the evil has mind powers that are stronger than a Psi Cop. I think, yes, it paints a target, but it also gives her a shield.
That is a good point. I didn't think about that, but I agree. We're going to go ahead and move into questions, predictions before we kick the newbies off. So I'm going to go to the newbies and ask, again, if you have any questions that stem from this episode and predictions for what's going to happen next. And we will answer all of that for you as soon as we kick you off. So let's go to Justin first.
Okay. I guess the main thing that I have that's kind of been undiscussed or unanswered during this episode is the whole, being a D&D fan, what I consider to be the whole Eye of the Beholder ship that was above, that attacked Catherine at this planet. The planet being, Sigma 957. To me, the giant eyeball in space thing. Do we ever really know what that is? Does that ever really come into any kind of storyline in the future? But the moment I saw that happen, I was like, oh, that's a giant Eye of the Beholder in space. What does that happen? And, and then just, I'll leave with kind of probably another one of my favorite quotes from the episode and something that kind of resonated with me was, I don't remember, it might have been Jakar who said it. I am both terrified and reassured that there are still wonders in the universe that are still unexplained. And that really hit me really hard as a phenomenal quote, because I still, the days that I'm standing outside looking at the stars, that was a really awesome quote, and something that I really will take with me beyond this episode.
Looking at this from 2022, I was thinking of James Webb, the telescope, when he said that line. I was like, weird, just right now realizing just how much we're not even ants. We're way beyond ants.
Oh my God,
I like the whole thing about D&D and all of that mentioned, because I don't know if it's been mentioned, but the script supervisor and a fellow writer, Larry DiTilio, he wrote for a lot of tabletop games and stuff. So if you ever look him up, you'll be like, oh, he wrote this, he wrote this, he wrote this, he wrote this.
He wrote part because he wrote a lot of, not only did he write a lot of D&D, but he also wrote a lot of stuff for Pathfinder as well.
Yeah.
I didn't know he was ever involved. Yeah, this is the first time I ever heard he was involved in.
He
in
wrote
B5.
Born to the Purple. That was his episode he wrote. But overall, he's a script supervisor.
That's the one I missed. That's the one I was out on. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, you'll see his name in every episode as like a fellow. He's basically the guy who punches up scripts if need be.
Super cool. As a big role playing fan, I didn't know he was ever involved. That's awesome.
Yeah, Detilio and JMS go all the way back to He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. That's where they met. Okay, let's go to Emily. Questions and predictions.
I'm assuming, well, you already told us Buster's coming back, so...
Well, he said he's coming back, and it's Walter Koenig.
Yeah. I kind of assume that, like, Psychor was going to be coming back, likely as a villain, given what they said about their influence on the Earth Alliance and the powers they're trying to create in people to basically gather more power. So they'll be like the new evil corporation or whatever. But other than that, I didn't really have much, but I do want to know how many of these actors came from theater. I feel like it's similar to Star Trek, where it has issues with overacting because they came from the theater and it's a different style. So yeah, would that be a spoiler or no? Can you tell me?
I couldn't tell you their resumes, but I think you're completely dead on. I see it too.
Yeah, they get a lot of actors from like theater, but also previous stuff that these people worked on: Hill Street Blues, Murder, She Wrote, Columbo, so on and so forth. So yeah, you have a mixture of those like iconic, like just work in TV all the time, and some people who are like TV and theater and just all theater. So yeah.
And remember, this is JMS's first time he's ever been a showrunner. As you just mentioned, he's been in a lot of shows as a writer and producer, but never as an executive producer. And he says multiple times when he's in casting calls, he has a vision of who the person is in their head, and he doesn't care who they are, where they're coming from. When that person walks in the room, they're casted. So he, for better or worse, that's what you get. Jessi, you're up.
I have no questions. I have no predictions. I just hope that the show continues to go up instead of down.
Well, 1 week ago, you were hating life choices. So if we get you here next week for War Prayer, I think we're moving forward. I think we're okay.
My prediction is that I'll continue to not enjoy Ivanova.
We shall see.
Nicole, you're up.
Before I go into questions and predictions, I just want to point out my other favorite part was when that Psi Cop broad got vaporized. That was awesome. That was one of my favorite parts because she sucked.
She will not be returning. Spoilers.
Yes. So my questions, I guess, would be when Jakar said we're not all what we seem, and he said Delenn and Londo, like he started naming people. I just want to know, what do you mean? I mean, he showed that he had a nice side, but I want to know more details about that. I want to know more about what's going to happen with Psychor. And I guess prediction, which we kind of already touched on, is I do think that maybe Psychor is going to now become more of like the villain side than Jakar is. So I think we're going to see some additional problems popping up with them.
Cool. Andrew, what do you got?
As far as predictions, of course, with how things ended with Talia, I'm going to predict that Psychor is coming back. And for my question, this could be completely arbitrary, but just more curiosity, is there what's the highest level on the psi scale?
Yeah, because we heard of a P5, which we knew was both Lita before Talia and Talia. We now know there's P10s, and then the Psi Cops are P12s.
Yeah. So I guess, is there anything higher than a P12?
Well, there's Ironheart, but yeah. Good question.
Well, like an established number.
Yeah, good question. We will not answer it for you, but we can try to answer it. Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and kick our newbies out so we can answer all of their questions. So if you are new to Babylon 5, this is where you should leave as well. And for those who either don't care about being spoiled or know the entire Babylon 5 5-year run, we will go to our credits and then come back and answer these questions and predictions. Until next week when we talk about War Prayer, I have been Scott, and with me has been
Emily,
Jessi,
Blake, I'm Justin,
Kevin,
Nicole,
Mike,
Andrew,
and Ryan.
And Ryan, you're going to stick with us here for Beyond the Rim, but thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you here. And again, for those who have realized that Ryan is much smarter than any of us, you should go check out his podcast because I'm sure it's better than ours. And that is in the show notes. You can check it out there.
Right.
Ryan, thank you so much for
honestly,
joining us. It was awesome meeting you.
Yeah.
Pleasure chatting to all of you people.
Is killer too, Ryan. Love it.
Thank you.
Honestly, I don't care about the accent, but you're a lot of fun. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good time.
Well.
Thank you for listening to Grey 17, a Babylon 5 podcast. You can find all the places to listen to this podcast and links to our social media accounts at anchor.fm/Grey17podcast. We want to hear from you, so please join the discussion on Facebook and Twitter. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Grey 17 is a part of the Front Row Network and NPR Illinois Community Voices. You can find all the Front Row shows at thefrontrownetwork.com. Grey 17 is not affiliated with, and this podcast has not been prepared, approved, or licensed by Warner Brothers or any other owners of the Babylon 5 copyright. All audio clips included in this podcast are the intellectual property of their respective copyright holders. They are included here for the purpose of review, and no infringement is intended. The opening and closing Babylon 5 themes are available from Falling Matter on YouTube.
And what's out there?
The rim,
And beyond that?
the truth.
Welcome back to Beyond the Rim. We have jettisoned the newbies, and again, one last warning. If you are new to Babylon 5, you should not be listening to this because we are going to talk a lot about the future of the show, especially with this episode, because there's a lot to talk about. So we're going to roll through the questions and predictions our newbies had. And I think I want to start right where they started, and that is Sigma 957. And the idea that there are races out there that are much more powerful and don't care about the lesser races. Who wants to talk about Sigma 957 first?
I can jump in with that one.
Blake, please do.
So in what we're going to find in, I think, season 3, 4-ish is these are going to be the first ones. You know, they're going to use the Great Machine on Epsilon to go out and actually find these first ones and seek them out. And I mean, I think one of the best Ivanova episodes is she's on the bridge of the White Star. The, flaming head appears.
Peaky head
dog. This dialogue between this flaming head first one and Ivanova, who is not going to take no for an answer. And, I just love that whole episode and scene. But, we're going to see this come back. Almost the same visual, I think, as well for this one. That will be one of the first ones. Then we get into, Lorien, who's also one of the first ones, and just how that goes through the remainder of the series.
Yeah, I really, and I mentioned the tapping of the gas here. This opens up so much of what we're going to deal with throughout the show. And I think this is, we get a little bit of pieces here and there with Midnight and with Parliament and everything else, but this one's just Hunter, all universe building all the time. What else you guys got?
I think it's interesting how they frame the first ones here, though, with Jakar being in such awe of these beings, like they're bigger than us. But when we do think about when Ivanova meets them and what we know of Vorlons and Shadows, that they're basically children too. They're no better than us. And in fact, we have outgrown them and they don't need to be here anymore. While in this, it's still these big things that are beyond our comprehension, and they must be grander than us people with our petty problems. And then we learn otherwise.
I do like that Jakar is the one who talks about these people first, these civilizations, because he knows more than he lets on, mainly because of the Book of Jaquan, and he has read up on this stuff, so he knows more about what has happened in the past. So that's I love the fact that he's our gateway to that, and will be much more down the road. Kevin or Mike, you got anything else for the first ones, 957?
I wonder how our Ironheart would match up against the first ones after his little becoming situation. Who would be more powerful at that point? I would guess probably the first one still would be, but that would be an interesting debate.
Well, we don't know. We don't know the power set of like the Vorlons or anybody else. I mean, Jason Ironheart basically says, I can make you evaporate, but what's to say that Kosh can't do the same thing to you? We
also know, Ironheart at the end mentioned, I'll see you in a million years. And we know from the final episode of season 4,
Deconstruction of Falling Stars, one of my favorite episodes.
Stars, in a million years, humanity has evolved to a energy type, Vorlon type being on that trajectory.
Yeah, no, we've ascended. We've become in our own way in a million years, like Jason is.
Absolutely. And we go to the Vorlon homeworld. That's where that's New Earth, according to the JMS. But no, I love Deconstruction of Falling Stars, and I think I've mentioned this already before, because it just feels like 3 Twilight Zone episodes tied together into one Babylon 5 episode, so I do enjoy it. But yeah, no, the million year thing is is very much an important aspect and I think one of the newbies actually hit on too. They asked what happens in a million years. Well, the Earth explodes because of a supernova, and we don't know why. To this day in 2022, JMS has never said what caused the supernova, but that's what's going to kill Earth. So Andrew, as you said last week with the prediction, yes, the Earth does get destroyed, but we don't know why. But yeah.
And it ties back into what Sinclair talks about, why we must go to the stars, because one day it could be all wiped away.
Yeah, no Marilyn Monroe for us if we don't become Vorlons. Okay, so let's keep on moving down the list here. Okay, Jakar, we hit on that. Okay, so Emily talked about Bester and Psi Cop a lot. So I did spoil for them that Bester's coming back, but you know what? That's kind of a given. I will say the one thing I didn't get into on the main discussion is one of the reasons why Walter Koenig is even here is he is actually a long-term friend of JMS before the show. And actually, a little Star Trek piece, Walter Koenig is the person who gave JMS the warning about Deep Space Nine when they were both in pre-production. Walter Koenig gave JMS a call and said, "You're in trouble." And JMS is like, "Why?" Well, they're doing a Star Trek spinoff, and it's going to be set at a space station that is numbered and blah, blah, blah. And he listed off everything. So
I thought you were going to mention about how Bester was a second role, like a fallback position for
Go right ahead, Ryan.
Koenig,
Yeah.
because, he had a severe heart attack. And so he couldn't do a role that will come later this season that would have been a one and done role. So Bester is, in fact, the best thing to happen in terms of, he got a role that will be recurring, will be a major force that our heroes will have to deal with. And everybody that I know that is watching B5 for the first time, they just love how Bester is a character that all the other characters have to worry about when he comes aboard, which is something that we don't get from Walter Koenig a lot with his roles. A lot of the time, he's the guy on the ship that says, "This thing's happening, sir," while in this show, he's the guy that is the thing that's happening.
Yeah, when you're watching Sky Full of Stars, which will hit in 3 episodes, I believe, night number 2 was going to be Walter Koenig. So just remember that's very true, that we almost didn't get the Bester that we got because he was going to be night number 2. Let's see here. And Psi Cop, same idea. We talked about that quite a bit. And yeah, the Psi Cop is becoming the end-all, be-all villain behind the scenes when it comes to the Earth piece. They are playing their hand when it comes to both Clark assassination, which is coming. They are working with the Shadows, we find out later. Unfortunately, this is my one big complaint about how Babylon 5 ended with the rushed season 5, is we never really get a final conclusion to that Psi Cop story. We do in the books and everything else.
We got Byron.
Oh, God. Season 5 is going to be rough.
We got Robin Atkin Downs as Byron. Come on, everybody. Look, I agree. I think it's always amusing when you have first-timers who think that our main characters are going to somehow overcome Psi Cop, and it's just, and B5 in the end decides, no, that happens after the show is done, and maybe watch Crusade to find out what happened. But honestly, there's a part of me that's just I'm fine with it, because we had so many wars that I don't really know how on screen we would see our heroes beat Psi Cop, but at the same time, I do understand the frustrations, and I imagine the newbies will be like, "We've been with this show week to week," and you say everything pays off, everything has a conclusion or whatever, and then we get the Psi Cop, and it's just kind of Bester has a very good day and leaves the show, and we don't see him again.
Well, and not only that, but the reason why it frustrates me so much is, and I joked about this in an earlier episode, Garibaldi must suffer. Garibaldi goes through so much shit with the Psi Cop, and we never get any payback, and it frustrates the hell out of me.
But it's kind of funny, because it would annoy him too.
It would drive him nuts. Kevin, Mike, you guys got anything else you want to add about the Psi Cop?
I really don't. I mean, I think this is an episode, for as much as it builds the world, I think really it's you could almost sum it up as an affirmation episode, because everything that you've sort of thought was coming comes out in the open this time. It's you thought Earth might be evil and there might be stuff going on with the government. Yeah, Bester just came right out and pretty much told you, or I guess it was Jason Ironheart who really spilled the beans. But,
yeah.
I yeah, I don't think there's a lot necessarily besides the first ones and a little bit of Jakar's character to dig into here, because I think it really is just a little bit of a, yep, you were on the right path with all that stuff you were thinking.
Well, and the other thing to dig into here is Talia. But before we do that, and I know about Blake, you have stuff to talk about Talia as well, too. The other question that was brought up with Psi-Core was the levels of Psi. And I was able to find it.
Oh, good.
The levels of Psi, because the internet gives what we want. So I'm just going to read them off real quick. So P1 is basically, lowest level and so forth and so on. When we get to P5, that is your low-level Psi rating, but these are commercial telepaths. Commercial telepaths can also be P6, P7, and so forth and so on. P10 is in the high-level rating, and this is for Psi-Core instructors, are rated P10. And this is what Ironheart was before he got played with. Then we get to P11, which is usually Psi-Core administrators or senior instructors, and then P12, Psi Cops. P13 is the rating of and beyond any naturally bred human teep or telepath. Though all telepaths are a result of artificial manipulation, P13s and beyond usually result from further, more direct tampering. So you don't really get to P13 without getting played with. And then P40, there is P14 all the way up to P30 is speculated in the expanded universe. The only person that we have run into that potentially is in that higher level is actually Kevin from season 5. Byron's Kevin, the guy who can scan Bester and Bester doesn't know about it. He is at least a P14.
Mm.
So that's our size.
Before you guys dig into Talia, can I guess at the plot hole? You guys might, you alluded that
huge plot hole. Go for it.
Yeah, you alluded to that last week, and I've been thinking about it this week. And my guess is that with Jason rooting around in her mind, how could he possibly miss the fact that she is a sleeper agent and control?
Bingo.
Which I'm guessing was not the original plan, which is why the plot hole exists in the first place.
You would be correct, sir.
Okay.
Yeah. Blake, go ahead and go into more, and I'm going to pull up the JMS Usenet because he talks about it as well, too.
So, because the original plan, the sleeper agent was supposed to be Laurel. That was the original plan before Laurel got replaced and the series went the different direction. And with Talia in the role, that was not the plan. And that this episode kind of opens that, because I have the same thought as you there, that, with Ironheart in her head rooting around, not to know that she was that sleeper agent or to activate that. But then the other part of that, to take it further, is we know when that sleeper agent is activated, still has access to all of Talia's knowledge and memories. And this whole telekinesis thing never comes back up. That never gets, all the thoughts about concerning about, is Psi-Core going to go hunt this down? If Talia is this sleeper agent, Psi-Core would have known about this ability, this gift from Ironheart. And this never comes up again.
The closest you get is Bester making light of, we learned a lot during our interview and dissect. That's it. That's the closest you get. And you can infer that they learned about what we're talking about here from that. If you take him at his face value that they maybe dissected her, that's them scientifically trying to get what is inside of her so they can replicate it. I think that's the closest you can get to saying that they ever touch upon it after she leaves the series.
Yeah, and there's even an episode coming up in season 2, I think it's 2, with the Underground Railroad of Telepaths, and it directly references the Ironheart incident and talks about their friend Ironheart, but this still never comes back up in this way, even in that episode.
They mentioned, I think there is some there's some moments where they do mention that she has this ability. I think in that one, they literally show us a flashback to the scenes where she's like, she now has this ability. But the thing that we're harping on is she never uses it.
Yeah.
She never uses this thing, and they rarely ever talk about it. And in the end, it doesn't change up her status quo. We never actually get it changed, because even if at the end, she's given an ability that's super powerful. So we never really get to see her struggle with anything about that, because she's more powerful than anyone who could stop her anyway. And then she leaves.
Yeah, and I was trying to keep my poker face, Ryan, when you kept talking about, well, this is a game changer, and I'm like, no, it's not. But yeah, it was a nice little red herring of yours.
Purposely trying to mislead people with it too.
Yeah. So when asked after divided loyalties, which is when Talia leaves and soon is dissected. JMS said, somebody asked, couldn't Ironheart have removed control? Was Talia the original personality? JMS says control was the construct. So Talia was the original personality. The alternate personality was dormant at the time Ironheart was there. Cop out. And then finally he says, remember that Ironheart was not seeing Talia under the best conditions. He was fighting hard not to use his abilities for any reason because of the created mind quicks.
Nice try, JMS.
Yeah, I know.
Nice
Cop out. He was pulling everything in, and later he was shot. But he later on says that basically Andrea Thompson wanted to leave the show. She was not happy with how things were going, and so he wrote her out. And that was one of his trapdoors, was someone being control. And he's okay, you want to leave? You're a control. Have a nice day.
Well, and the gift from Ironheart wasn't when he was having all the quakes. It was after he had already done the whole becoming and was the energy being floating outside the station. So that doesn't work either.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's like you mentioned this on the first episode. JMS has a lot of trapdoors. One of them is control. He didn't know who he was going to use it on at this point, obviously, but he was ready to use it sooner or later.
Well, I feel like at the point when in all these shows where somebody has ascended, they no longer care what's happening in our realm of existence. So maybe he didn't look for it. Maybe he saw it and was like, don't know.
That's honestly a better answer than what JMS gave.
Yeah.
I would have been fine with that. JMS like, yeah, he saw it, but you know what? In a million years, it ain't going to matter. So have a nice day.
I thought it was really telling that one of the newbies, I think it was maybe Jessi, said that they're happy that this episode gave Talia something to do and that they hope that Talia becomes a much more defined and active character. And that doesn't happen. And to the point in which the actress leaves the show because they were giving her basically nothing to do. And I think that's also why this episode always is a letdown for me, not only because we don't get all the telekinetic stuff or gift or like control or whatever. It's like this should be a game changer in terms of her actual character, who she is and how she should be in the show, but it never really does change it. She keeps being the, hello, I'm in the show too now. And you get to the point where it's like, you guys will watch it, but like her and Ivanova have only 2 episodes together where they have like a plot from beginning, middle, and end in the entire show. They only have like 2 like full episode plots together. Everything else is like they share 1 or 2 scenes like they did in this episode.
Since we are talking about trapdoors and everything else, the one thing I want to throw out that we haven't talked about yet, and obviously the newbies will potentially notice it down the road, is this is the first time we have Jack in the episode. Jack is the one that Bester talks to through his mind and tells him to lead the way. We do find out later on that Kevin's staring at me right now. We do find later on that Jack is the one working behind the scenes and will shoot Garibaldi in the back here at the end of the year when he tries to warn people about the president's ship.
If only Garibaldi listened to Walker Smith. Watch your back. But he didn't listen.
Well, in my headcanon, I think Jack is already working for Psi Cop at this point, because he really doesn't care much when Bester starts playing around in his head. He says, okay, let me show you where the captain is. He's right over here, the commander.
I think the other thing I'll add, and, Justin's been the one since almost the very first, pilot about Earth Alliance being the Nazis and a fascist regime, which we know it's heading there with Clark, but it's not there yet. We see the pieces of it. We see the Psi Corps. It's already been referenced with Psi Corps meddling into elections with endorsing Clark as vice president. I mean, we see the pieces falling into place with it. I just think it's interesting how much Justin has jumped into that view of what the Earth Alliance is at this state on the political side of it. And I think I said this even last time, was how much of the view of this in a 2022 lens of everything that's going on versus, when this show came out. I don't think the Earth Alliance as it is now in the show is quite the totalitarian regime that we're going to see come out of it. And it's certainly not the transition we're going to see to the Interstellar Alliance by the end of it. But it's just interesting how much Justin has locked into that piece at this point.
Yeah. And I agree with you. Part of it is, too, the 2022 lens. It's been an interesting few years for us Americans and everywhere else across the world. But, yeah, so...
did you guys not lock in on that when you were first viewing the show at all? Because I did. Like, when I watched this when I was a kid and I had this on DVD, I was just like, I was similar. I was like, bam, bam, bam. And remember, I'm watching this in like early 2000s, mid 2000s. So I was like, I'm seeing these things too. And maybe it's just the iconography is so distinct to me. Like I said, Talia Winters is in the first episode, and I see her and I go, oh yes, I know what you are. You're the blonde-haired, blue-eyed lady with the tight green dress and the black gloves and the badge. And I'm like, okay, and if Earth has this as a part of it, on and on and on it goes. And then we get the next episode that you guys will cover, the War Prayer, which really just kind of cements.
Yes.
Gives you no doubt. But I was very much like within the first handful of episodes, I was also similar. So I'm just curious about if any of you guys were, if it was a slow bubble surprise.
I don't think I picked up on it as early as Justin or you did, certainly. But yeah, you do get there eventually. But I definitely didn't pick up on it in the first episode like he did.
See, for me,
he's a humongous, Nazi Germany, historian. So he's read more stuff on it than most of us, I'm sure.
Yeah. And see, for me, I started watching the show when it first aired, I think. I can't remember when I started watching, but I was 11. So if I did pick up on it, I couldn't tell you at this point because I can't remember. But by the time I was watching on DVDs, much like you, Ryan, I mean, yes. But unfortunately, and this is why I love this, how we're doing this so much. I don't remember what I remember when I first watched this thing. So watching these guys do this, it's really fun for me.
And I will say, definitely watching it later, because I mean, I watched it, say, back in the 90s when it came out, but again, about the same age as Scott. Watching it later on DVD, the iconography is definitely there, and you can see the path it's heading to. I mean, definitely, I can see where the pieces are. I can remember seeing those pieces, seeing the Psi Corps uniform, seeing a lot of that image, especially in the episodes coming up where we get into the negative alien sentiment. And even that's been touched on a little bit in some of these early episodes with the presidential race and other things, and some of the criticisms of Clark about his support for aliens. And I definitely see those pieces. It's just like I said, it's interesting how much Justin, to me, has keyed into it's already there versus it's well on the path to that. Especially, I think it's in the next episode, they basically plan their own version of the Reichstag fire.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah. War Prayer, basically, if Bester and Ironheart aren't beating you over the head with Earth Alliance has problems, War Prayer is like, hey. But of course, we still, at this point, we still have Santiago, even though we haven't really played with that much. So it doesn't go full tilt crazy until the end of the season. But, yeah.
Well, part of me, when I was first viewing it, and I'm curious because I think, I can't speak for you all, but like I grew up with Star Trek. Of course, I had my understanding of Star Trek, and obviously people draw comparisons to Deep Space Nine and all that is obvious. But a part of me was like, oh, you can't start out your sci-fi show with your humans government being evil in any way. That's something maybe you do 4 seasons down the road when you decided that you're going to be a deconstructionist take of this thing. Like Deep Space Nine doesn't immediately start out the gate with like everything is kind of crappy the way back home with Starfleet. That's something that they go along with as it goes. But to me, I think that was a hurdle that I know that some of my friends and even myself had, where it's like, no way, Earth has to be good because they are humans, and the guy with the red eyes, he's bad.
And I think that's one of the things that actually drew me to Babylon5. I mean, I started out with Star Trek watching TNG at the time, then to DS9, watched TOS somewhere in there. But I think that's one of the things that drew me into Babylon5 was that it wasn't this perfect vision of the future. The people are flawed. The characters are flawed. You've got conflict that Roddenberry never allowed. That's why we didn't see it show up in Star Trek till after he was out of the picture. And even then it was a struggle because Berman didn't want to allow it in either. There's stories about him and Ira Stephen Bear just having absolute knockdown dragouts over the tone of DS9 later in the series.
And that's why Voyager is the way it is too.
Yeah.
It's like you can't do these things.
We were having this
dark things.
Yeah, we were having this conversation on a side chat today, actually, because I was recommending to Kevin, you need to watch What We Left Behind, the documentary for DS9. Because, Ryan, between any day of the week, either DS9 or Babylon5 are my favorite sci-fi show of all time. That goes back and forth. But to Blake's point, Ira Stephen Bear basically says, finally, there was one moment where Berman just stopped giving a shit, and that's when we actually were able to do what we want. And what that was, and I didn't say it in our chat because there's people watching Deep Space Nine for the first time, was when they let Baral die. Because Bear wanted Baral to die. Berman was like, fine, kill him. And that Berman was never involved in the conversation ever again about story time because he moved over to Voyager and started screwing that show up.
Yeah, it's crazy how these shows work, right? Where, B5, even now within the first 2 seasons, we're going to see, even though JMS has a strict vision of what he wants, we're going to see how it's still held back from the restraints of like other writers, other producers, network stuff, and things of this era of television too, where you have to explain everything again. Like the opening of this episode is Talia reminding you how psychics work in this universe because you may have missed those other 4 episodes. Yeah, other than what we've discussed, I can't think of too many other things within Mind War that are like spoilery other than like, you one of you nailed it, where it is this episode serves as obviously setting up stuff, but mainly to answer and affirm things that the audience has been picking up on their own. And I think that's actually very essential to have these episodes because, we have our newbies, but I think we all remember what it's like to watch TV shows once a week. You get that point where it's like, will this show actually go anywhere that I think it's going? And at B5, we know we'll play the long, long game with these things, but, you still have to answer some of these things up front, or else you're going to get your mystery box shows of today, like Lost, where it's like, yes, this episode tells us pretty clearly that Psi Corps is evil and Earth isn't great either, which is good because it positions the audience to be further on the crew of Babylon 5 side because we know them to be good.
Yep. Good point.
Yeah. And I just finished the most recent season of The Umbrella Academy, which is a show that I do really enjoy, but what you just said kind of resonates with me because it is a series where they frequently have like what feels like an odd, weird, out of place visual that they very much did deliberately, or some strange piece of dialogue or whatever else. They throw a lot of weird stuff at you with no explanation or payoff, at least no payoff maybe for many seasons. And I can take it for a while, but at the point where I've now watched 3 seasons with the same characters and there are things that they alluded to or said or did in season 1 that I still don't know about, it's very frustrating.
We'll go ahead and wrap it up there. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us for Beyond the Rim. If you are joining us for the first time, please be sure to go over to anchor.fm/Gray17 podcast. There you can find any way you want to subscribe to us, as well as our Twitter and Facebook feed, so you can check us out there and join the conversation as well there. Ryan, tell them where they can find Yum Yum.
Yum Yum is on all the podcast hosting sites, including YouTube as well. You just look for Yum Yum Podcast and you shall find us. We are posting weekly. As I said, we are in season 3 of Babylon 5, which is our personal favorite season of the series, so you'll be hearing a lot of fiery opinions. It also has my opinion, the worst episode of Babylon 5 in it, so you'll have to listen to find out which one I think that is. But we are on all the social medias as well under Yum Yum Pod or Yum Yum Podcast, always interacting with folks. So if you're keen on talking or listening to people talk about Star Trek Discovery or Babylon 5 from a lens of experience and from a rewatch, come on over and check us out.
That's awesome. Thank you, Ryan, for joining us. We've had so much good time with you here. Hopefully we can do it again. Until next time when we discuss War Prayer, I'm Scott, and with me has been
Blake,
Kevin,
Mike,
and Ryan.
Thanks, everybody.
Anatomically impossible, Mr. Garibaldi. But you're welcome